Got it.
You're not on
Yes.
TV.
Yep. Mark, if you can turn that off on the TV back there. They don't want to listen to me, apparently. Matthew chapter 24. Now, Matthew chapter 24, can someone tell me what it's about? It's about the destruction of Jerusalem. How do we know that? Go back to the very beginning. Matthew chapter 21, 22, and 23. Jesus gives these series of lectures and sermons against the scribes and Pharisees and the rulers. At the end of this, he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem," Matthew chapter 23, verses 37, "the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often I would have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate." What's the word desolate mean? Destroyed, empty, kaput. Kaput. Real technical term. Kaput. Desolate. "For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" That's a key verse right there. Blessed, you will not see me again. Now, he's going to describe when that again is. You're not going to see me again until you say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And people will say, "Oh, he's talking about the end of time." He's not. Jesus left the temple. Remember, his disciples can hear all of this. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out the buildings of the temple. And Luke says the beauty of them. They're pointing out how beautiful this place is. Verse 2, chapter 24, tells us what the entire discourse is about to be. "But he answered them, 'You see all these?'" All what? You see all of what? The stones, the temple. "You see this? Do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Does anybody not understand what he's talking about right here? Do I need to clarify anything? It's the destruction of the temple. You see these stones? Not one of these is going to be left on top of another. He's not speaking figuratively, because Josephus, how many of you have read Josephus? Word for word. Oh, what a page turner, right? No, it's not. It's thick with history. The first part is, he calls the first part of the book, he talks about the Jewish history. When he comes to the Romans and their part, he calls it the War of the Jews. He describes exactly what Jesus says. It is fulfilled. Not one stone was left on top. People describe it, he describes it that the fires were so hot that the gold and the metal, people were, after it was all done, people were digging out in the cracks because the gold had melted down inside of them. The gold and the silver, that's how hot this got. Gold really doesn't need that high of a temperature, by the way. It's like lead. It doesn't need that high. But it had melted into the cracks, and people were looking for the gold in the cracks in there. That's what chapter 24 is about. Okay? Is there anybody who does not see it or who does not agree, who has another point of view? If not, speak now or forever hold your peace. Now, turn down to chapter, or still in this chapter, verse 32. Are there any horticulturists here? Anybody knows about trees? We do, we just don't know. He's not asking for an expert in horticulture, those who know about trees. But he says, verse 32 of chapter 24, "From the fig tree learn its lesson." They would have known this. "As soon as its branches becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near." If I had somebody who was a farmer here, who knew about growing crops, he would tell us the same thing. Jan, have you harvested your corn yet? You started. How do you know when it's time to harvest corn? The ears that were up like this have fallen down, right? You know that. Now, we don't all know that. We drive by cornfields all the time, but we don't realize that. But there are other things. When an apple turns red, you know that it's getting ripe. There's a lot of things that tell us, to give us signs. But he says, learn from the fig tree. Something that was very familiar to everyone who can hear this. They all know about fig trees. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see, what's the next word? All. Does all mean some? Yes or no? How many? Everybody agree? All means all? It does not mean some. Does it mean when you see one of these things happen? Nope, he says all. When you see all these things, you know that he is near. All of what things? And I know this is very simple. Everything that he has talked about up to this point. That's what he means. All of these things will come to pass. Everything that he has told you about. Am I oversimplifying it? But there are some people who say, wait a minute, and they'll back up to some part about when you see him coming in the clouds. Well, that hasn't happened. Or has it? Truly, when he says here, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. What's it mean at the very gates? Anybody live in a gated community? Anybody live in a castle? Well, when something's at the gates, where is it? It's at the entrance of where you're at. It's at the gates. Truly I say to you, this generation. Truly I say to you, the world will not end, or this generation. This generation. Would the people who are hearing this know that he's talking about them, or is he talking about something hundreds, thousands of years in the future? Talking about them. I know I'm being so over simple in this, but it is so simple. You cannot make a mistake on this when you see everything that he has talked about from verse 3 to verse 31 has to happen in that generation. No exceptions. I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. All these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. What I have said will happen. I don't care if the world and the universe passes away. What I have said will happen. So we've started at the end. Now we're going to go backwards. What happened? Very quickly. Very quickly. His disciples ask him, and it's James, Andrew, Peter, and John. Mark lists the four people that ask him. When will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming? And only Matthew records, what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age? They all ask, what and when? So those are the two questions in big terms. When is this going to happen? And what are going to be the signs? When they ask what are going to be the signs, they're asking, how will we know when this is about to happen? Agreed? Is there any part about that that's not clear? How will we know when this is about to happen? Why would they want to know that? Curiosity? So they won't be there. To be prepared. Curiosity, maybe. Imagine that you're hearing this. Imagine that someone has told you, you see your house? Next week, this house isn't going to be here. You need to say, oh, okay. What would you want to know? Yeah, when's it going to happen? And I don't want to be in there. Okay? And Jesus answered, see that no one leads you astray. He was giving them warnings. And these are things that actually happen. From history, they record it. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. Remember, this is going to happen before the destruction of Jerusalem. So it's going to happen in their lifetime. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars. Again, this is going to happen in their lifetime. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. The end of what? End of what? The temple, Jerusalem. The end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are but the beginning of birth pains. Has the end happened yet? No. Hasn't happened. They're the beginning of birth pains. Guys, you know what this means when it's talking about the beginning of birth pains, right? Ladies, it might be unclear to you, right? No, I have that opposite, don't I? When a woman goes into labor, she knows. These are the beginning of birth pains. Is the baby born in the first pain? No. I'm glad we decided that. No, these are the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Did that happen? Yes. Who was the first apostle to be killed? Stephen was a disciple, not an apostle. Who's the first apostle? James. James was the first one that was killed. Why was James killed? To please the Jews. Herod had him killed because he thought it would please the Jews. Okay? And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. The very warnings that Jude gives, the very warnings that Peter gives, that Paul gives, that's all there. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. Read Paul's writings. Read Jude. And because lawlessness will increase and the love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. The end of what? The end of the world? The end of Jerusalem. He's still talking about Jerusalem. Don't get caught up in the end of the world. Was the gospel preached in the lifetime of the apostles to the whole world? How do we know? Because Paul says so in Colossians chapter 1, as it has gone to the whole world. Now, you may not believe it, you may not agree with it, but Paul said it, and Paul was inspired by the Holy Spirit. It did happen. The gospel must be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, then the end will come. The end of what? Jerusalem. Still talking about Jerusalem. We're not going to go away from Jerusalem, but I have to keep asking that, because at some point you're going to say, well, I must be talking about the end of the world. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, verse 15, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Why does he say let the reader understand? Take note of this. Understand what I'm telling you. Luke says when you see the army surrounding Jerusalem. Same context of this right here. When you see them, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is in the housetop not go down to take what is in the house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight might not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation. I'll stop right there. Okay, what's he talking about? Why is he telling them this? Verse 16, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. He's telling them, these are the signs. When you see these signs, get out of Judea. Get out of Jerusalem. Save your life. They ask, what are the signs? I just told you the signs. When you see these, when you see the army surrounding, when you see Titus, Vespasian surrounding Jerusalem, get out of there. Okay. Pray that your flight might not be in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation. When was the greatest tribulation in the whole world? The destruction of Jerusalem. How do we know that? Because he says in verse 21, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. No, and never will be. So when you read the book of the late great planet Earth, and he predicted that the world was going to end in 1984, did the world end in 1984? Is he a true prophet? How do we know that? We're still here. And when you get down to verse 36, it says, no one knows. No one knows. Okay? Not even Christ. Okay? Not even the Son of God, Son of Man. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would have been saved. It is going to be so horrific that it's going to have a stop put it. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. See, I have told you beforehand. See, I have told you beforehand. What does that mean? I told you beforehand. You ask me, what are the signs going to be? I've told you beforehand what the signs are going to be. But wait, there's more. So, if they say to you, look, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Oh. This is before verse 34. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Then you'll see the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Anybody love to watch the old westerns? They're going through the desert, and all of a sudden they look on the horizon, there's about 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 vultures. And from that they deduce death. There's the dead body. There's something dead up there. When you see the vultures, you know. When you see these signs, you know. We still see that, yes. I have a group that lives around me. Vultures, true vultures. I'm talking birds, I'm not talking people. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, what days? We're still talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. What does that mean? And how do you know what it means? Does it mean that, now when we get into the book of Revelation, it's going to say like a third of the sun didn't shine and a third of the stars didn't shine. Are they talking literally? No. They're talking figuratively. And what did they mean in the Old Testament when they said, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken? It's judgment. When you read that in the Old Testament, it means judgment is coming. After the tribulation of those days, when they are trying to put you to death. And remember in chapter 7, when he says, holding back the angels from the four corners, he says, before you do this, mark my people. And we go back to the book of Ezekiel. The same thing happens when they're about to destroy Jerusalem then. And he says, I want you to go through and I want you to mark all of the people. Is it a literal sign? No. It is symbolic of God knows those who are his own. And exactly what is happening here is what's going to happen in the book of Revelation. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. Then all the tribes of earth will mourn, and will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Where have we heard that before? Turn back to, let's see, Matthew chapter, oh, wait a minute. Let's go ahead. Matthew chapter 26, 27. Before Pilate, before... Oh, now I've lost it here. Okay, I'm sorry. Verse 64 of Matthew 26. I didn't have it in red letters. I don't have a red letter Bible. They're bringing false witnesses before Christ. And they can't find anything that will stick. But in verse 61 it says they find two that says he said he's able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. What was he talking about then? Yeah, you're going to kill me, but I'm going to raise in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, and the high priest is Caiaphas. That year he was Caiaphas. The Romans installed the high priest at that time. Between Caiaphas and Annas, they took turns, okay? Was it the Romans' job to install the high priest? This is no. Okay? The high priest stood up and said, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Is he talking about the end of the world? Who's he talking to? He's talking to the high priest, but who else is there? All these witnesses, all these people in the council. The ones, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Judgment. It's exactly what he has said in Matthew chapter 24. He's coming on the clouds. Does it mean that he is physically riding on the clouds, coming down and presenting himself? No. It is apocalyptic language that we have seen over and over in the Old Testament. When God comes riding on the clouds, he's not talking about physically coming down. It is symbolic of the judgment against them. That's a lot to take in, isn't it? But you've read the Old Testament, haven't you? You've read these over and over, right? Is it the 6th or the 9th? It's the 9th. That's when all the stars align in the heaven. Did I get the date? Is it the 9th? The end of the world? Again. Waiting for a loud trumpet. Where's Al Hurt when you need him? And some of you are wondering, who's Al Hurt? Famous trumpeter from New Orleans. Okay. In Revelation chapter 1 and verse 7. It isn't. But it's not something to become worried about either. Unfortunately, yes. Revelation chapter 1 and verse 7. John introduces himself and he gives the glory to God, and he describes from Psalm 69 about Christ in verse 5 and 6. It says, behold, he is coming with clouds, and every eye will see him, and even those who pierced him. All the tribes of the earth will mourn because of him. Even so, amen. Even those who pierced him. Even though, who pierced Jesus? Even those who pierced him, they will see him because he's coming on the clouds. What do they see? They're seeing the judgment against Jerusalem. And it's not going to happen in secret. It's not going to be hidden, as it were. Every eye will see it. They will know that this is the judgment against Jerusalem. And remember, he says in Matthew chapter 24, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. when the judgment comes down, and it's represented as him coming in the clouds. The same language that is used if you go back to the Old Testament. Let me read a couple of these for you. Oh, it's too late. Oh, I've got them right here. Let's see. Ezekiel. Son of man, prophesy and say, Ezekiel chapter 30, verse 2. Thus says the Lord God, wail, woe to the day, for the day is near. Even the day of the Lord is near. Is this the end of the world he's talking about? No. No. Prophecy against him. It will be a day of clouds, the time of the Gentiles. The sword will come upon Egypt. It is a day of judgment for who? Egypt. Jeremiah chapter 4. At this time it will be said, verse 11, it will be said to this people and to Jerusalem, a dry wind of the desolate heights blows in the wilderness toward the daughter of my people, not to fan or to cleanse. A wind too strong for these will come for me. Now I will also speak judgment against them. Behold, he shall come up like clouds, and his chariots like a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, for we are plundered. It's the same language that they use over and over when they talk about he's coming on the clouds. Was this the end of the world? No. It was a day of judgment. It was a day when God reckoned his wrath against them. Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1, the burden against Egypt. Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud, and he will come into Egypt. The idols of Egypt will totter at his presence, and the heart of Egypt will melt in its midst. End of the world or judgment against Egypt? It's judgment. He's talking about judgment. A judgment is going to come against Jerusalem. All these things. They asked him, what are going to be the signs and when's this going to happen? He gives them the what are the signs. He tells them the when. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out. Now, if he's talking to us, are we living in Jerusalem? It's already happened. This isn't talking about hundreds or thousands of years in the future. They asked him about this point in time. And that judgment comes to them in Matthew chapter 23. I don't care how many times they ring that bell, we're going to be here till 4 o'clock. Therefore, Matthew 23:31, therefore you are witnesses against yourselves. You are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? Therefore, indeed, I send you prophets, wise men, and scribes, which he did. Some of them you will kill and crucify, which they did. And some you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city. Read the book of Acts. That on you may come all, on you, who's he talking to? He's talking to the Jews. He is talking to that crowd right there that he's speaking to in the temple. On you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Assuredly I say to you, exactly what he's going to say when he gets on the other side of the temple, out in the Mount of Olives. Surely I say to you, all these things will come upon 2,000 years from now? 400 years from now. This generation. If you read Matthew 21 through 24, it's the same thing he keeps speaking over and over. He's not talking about the end of the world. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Once he gets towards the end of 24 and into 25, he begins to talk about. He talks about the parable of the talents. He talks about the parable of the wedding feast. He's talking about to be ready for the end of the world. But up to this point, and he says there in verse 35, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Up to and including, you'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. Not literally coming on the clouds, but a judgment against Jerusalem and the Jews. The end of the Jewish nation. Any questions? We got till 4 o'clock. 50-cent bonus wings? Yes?
The passage you just read to us where Jesus is talking to those Jews and telling them, you stoned and killed the prophets. That wasn't them. It was previous generations. And the you could refer to future generations just in the same way.
Can, but it doesn't, because he says this generation, that on you, it's the end. This great tribulation that's going to come about, it's not talking about the future, thousands of years. He's talking about the end of it in that point. Because up to that point, and he says it very plainly, on you may come the righteous blood of shed on the earth. He's specifically talking to them there in that situation, and not a future generation. Not talking to us today, he's talking to them in that day. And the whole context of it tells you that. And it's unmistakable. It is not talking about someone else. He's talking about that generation. And Matthew 24 is really the blueprint for the entirety of the book of Revelation when you look at it. Okay, go get your 50-cent boneless wings.